All right, now that's the latest in the world of sports, and it ushers us into the second hour of the show, where we're supposed to have a conversation centered on the week's top political and governance developments and what a week it has been. Of course, focus, first of all, was on the floor of the House, that's Parliament, as the National Assembly was dispensing of the Finance Bill 2023. And we saw some of the robust engagements took over the deliberations on the floor of the House, even as the majority eventually had their way and the minority definitely had their say. So we'll take a look at the consequences around the Finance Bill 2023 as it awaits President William Ruto to assent it. Equally, we'll evaluate some of the developments that played out as members of the Fourth Estate found themselves on the receiving end in one way or the other. Some of the top government officials, including the Deputy President, saying that this is the new order. Get used to it. So what exactly does it mean for a free press, for members of the Fourth Estate as they endeavor to hold the government to account? This and other more deliberations set to be held right here on the round table. I'm joined by three gentlemen. Allow me to introduce them for your benefit back at home. First of all, I'm joined by Leonard Khafafa, who's a public policy analyst. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Karibu sana.
Pleasure is all mine.
Yes, were you watching the WRC in any chance?
Incidentally not.
Yeah.
Although I'm big on motorsports.
Okay.
But this year, for some reason, I gave it a pass.
But I'm pretty sure you're following the developments on the floor of the House.
Definitely.
And we'll get to discuss about them. Asante sana for your time. Equally joined by Wakili Ishmael Nyaribo, who's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. Karibu sana. It's a pleasure to have you with us. I don't think I've seen you this whole year, yeah?
Asante sana. Thank you for having me today.
Welcome. And equally joined by the Duke of Mosocho, Dismus Mokua, who's a political risk analyst. Karibu sana to the round table. Hope you've had a great weekend. Huh?
I can't complain.
Yes. Okay, gentlemen, so let's get right into it. As I mentioned, a lot was happening on the floor of the House, and I'd like us to begin on that particular point because we saw a couple of amendments, 10 amendments in total to the finance bill were received, 8 from Azimio, 2 from the government side. And I'd like to start with your analysis, gentlemen, quite briefly on the taxation measures that were ratified by the National Assembly. Some of them should be coming into effect actually this week, Saturday, the 1st of July. So your analysis on the taxation measures first, but equally your reaction to the quality of debate that was seen on the floor of the House. Leonard, I'd begin with you. What's your reaction?
These measures were by and large expected. The economy is in parlor straits. And to dig us out of the hole, the government has had to resort to these taxation measures. So they were expected. As early as a couple of years ago, it had been predicted that whoever won the presidential elections in 2023 would have to raise taxes, through increases in VAT and in excise duties. So that was expected, and it has come to pass. So nothing unusual, nothing untoward. This is what should be. Tough times, tough decisions. Yeah.
Interesting. And what's your take on the quality of debate that was seen on the floor of the House?
The government had its way, rather, as a result of having a majority over the opposition. But I think even those members of the opposition who voted with government voted on the strength of the task that is at hand, rebuilding the nation. We are at ground zero, and we have to rebuild from someplace. So those who voted with the government, I think, exercised their patriotic duty and voted accordingly. So yeah, whereas the debate was robust, there's been a lot of discussion around this finance bill, I think more than other years, far more than any other year. And views have been collected left, right, and center. I think the debate has been robust all around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well noted. Wakili, as you come in, it's proper to note that the minority was whitewashed in one way or the other during those 2 days of debate on the floor of the House. But we did see petitions and oral submissions that were disregarded, especially on some of those contentious clauses around the Finance Bill 2023. And there are those who feel that Parliament, in one way or the other, did not listen to the Kenyans' plea around those contentious issues. So from your analysis in terms of the debate on the floor of the House, were they, holding the views of Kenyans at the end of the day, or this was a must pass? This was ground zero, as he's mentioned.
Thank you. You say it whitewashed, and my friend has said, Mr. Khafafa says that it was such a nice debate. I mean, first and foremost, what debate? I mean, we all knew the bill would pass anyway, so the talks in Parliament, which were really one-sided, which were Kenya Kwanza sided, was really an internal debate. It was Kenya Kwanza and discussing what the government wants to do and debating whether it's correct in terms of are there any amendments we need to do. They brought in two, acted like they really had listened to the people and made those amendments. But if you had to, and this is a very important question, was there a quality debate? Quality debate means all the stages of budget making have been fulfilled, and then the public has been given opportunity to air their views, and those views are then taken care of during debate. The discussion should extend towards saying, what did we hear from the people? Not exactly what the kind of tax that is being proposed will do for the country, because that is more or less obvious. So if you ask me in terms of debate, really, if we are this chance, now it is becoming low, so we may not have that chance. A proper debate should have been held, and the people's views should have been properly consulted and, implemented in the floor of the House. To be honest, and it's important we, as professionals, stand firm and say, no, that did not happen. But if you ask me whether the tax levies, by governments in East Africa, in Kenya, and in the world should always be implemented, or rather, should we tax people? Should we not tax people? The truth of the matter is, if you want to be independent as a nation, you must contribute to the tax, kitty of any country. There is no question that a government should collect enough tax from people so that it can implement its policies. Yeah. There's a catch, however, and this is really where the argument is. You see, initially the argument was, should it be 5%, 3%, or now 1.5%? That is okay to argue. But to say that you are a shoemaker or you repair shoes, therefore you should not pay tax, and the big corporations should pay tax, that is really misplaced. Every single Kenyan should contribute towards the tax kitty so that we can have good roads, we can have services, we can have independence. As a country, we should be able to feed our own people. Yeah. That is not an issue. It is, in fact, every other professional believes that is the way to go. All right. Now, the catch is this tax? Historically, I don't care about what Kenya Kwanza will do, because we will come to that after 5 years. Historically, have governments been keen on utilizing the tax collected for services and infrastructure and benefiting the masses, the public, or they have been utilizing it through corrupt cartels and corrupt means? And that is, I think, what is really hurting people, that immediately Kenya Kwanza took office, the way they started, the way they said, what is your value, when the interview were coming in, and they said their value, and we saw that, okay, fine, this is their value. I think the cheapest one was 400 million. So, and then the way now immediately they started, were they assisting the hustlers, or they were actually assisting themselves? And I think that is now when people started to imagine that maybe this tax is really not going to be used for us. So we agree tax must be collected, no doubt about it. Debate should be comprehensive. Everyone should be included. But this tax you collect, where are you going to use it? And I think this is an issue that still Kenyans are asking themselves. Will it really come back to us? Will we see better roads, clean cities? Will we see services? You know, will fuel go down? Will food be affordable? Will school fees be affordable? Those are the issues that people are really, even today, actually asking themselves. And we wanted them to come in the floor of the House, and they did not come out in the floor of the House in Parliament, yes.
Interesting. Dismus, your take in terms of perhaps what is raised, the accountability aspect, even as you add on your points around the taxation measures that we saw.
You know, there are two issues. There is the income and expenditure. So the first level to look at is income. Then expenditure, or now the resources are going to be used, is an entirely different ballgame. But let's look at, let's give it an helicopter view. This finance bill was characterized by three things. Number one, there was a lot of propaganda, misinformation, and disinformation. Majority of the people who are discussing this finance bill 2023, in fact, are not socialized with the document. At some stage, President Ruto hosted business leaders at Serena, and you know, they came forward with a laundry list saying, Mr. President, we would like you to do this. Then he makes reference to the finance bill. He says, for the people from the leather industry, this has already been taken care of. So all the issues they were raising, there are already incentives in the finance bill. So then one begins to wonder, if Kenya's business and corporate leaders have not socialized with the finance bill, how can they then participate in an informed conversation? So it was very embarrassing for them to tell President Ruto, we'd like this. Then he tells them, I've got good news for you. It's already captured here. We want this. I've got good news for you. It's already captured here. Then secondly, some members of the National Assembly, it seems to me again that no socialists read the document proper, because a number of them wouldn't even tell the difference between goods that are tax exempt or zero rated. So there was a lot of debate and nobody knew exactly what they were talking about. So then you begin to wonder, if these members of the National Assembly who are going to vote on this bill, they don't know the difference between tax exempt and zero rated, then what is the quality of conversation are they going to have? And then number three, in mature democracies, and Kenya aims to be in that space, like say in the UK or in the US, always the opposition or the minority will come with the alternative. But we didn't see that happening in Kenya. The Azimio, which is a minority, did not give us an alternative budget. They said that for them, their primary responsibility is to criticize, but they did not give us an option. And we see it happening in the UK, where you have the shadow minister coming up with alternative proposals. In the UK, where the minorities come with the proposals. So we expected them also to give us proposals. And then lastly, I think now Kenya Kwanza has managed to mainstream the economics conversation in Kenya. Everybody, starting from Mama Mboga, every Kenyan now has got a view about the finance bill, informed or otherwise. And you saw President Ruto going on national TV and explaining it for about 4 hours. One would have expected that Azimio would have done the same. That Mr. Raila Odinga would have called a journalist or a news conference and actually discuss those numbers into detail and break them. He did not. One would have expected that Martha Karua would do the same. She did not. One would have expected Kalonzo Musyoka to do that. Kalonzo Musyoka did not do that. So the debate was just left to Kenya Kwanza. Yeah, but I think in future, there may be need for capacity building for the key players, especially on the taxation terminologies. I think they can go to Strathmore University and get Professor James McPhee to give them basics. And you know, really, you know, you're smiling. This is a very serious issue that when Professor Njuguna tells them these goods are zero rated and these are tax exempt, and you are voting on a clause and you actually don't know what this is all about, it becomes a bit untidy. But all in all, as Leonard has indicated, the Kenya Kwanza has taken office after the Handshake brothers mismanaged the economy, so they're actually cleaning tables. And as a student of taxation, we are told there are two things you cannot avoid in life. You can't avoid tax, and you can't avoid death. So if you expect to be a beneficiary of public goods, public services, be prepared to pay your part of tax.
And what he raised, has that assurance been given that, you know, at the end of the day, these taxes will go to the intended purposes with minimal wastage. Has this message been given by the current administration?
Absolutely. The 2010 Constitution gave us a lot of governance institutions, from the controller of budgets, from the Auditor General. There are several, the DPP, everybody. You've got those institutions that have got capacity to ensure that this coin goes for the intended purposes. And if you try to assault the resources placed in your hands, then you are going to pay for it. And again, you've seen, after he assumed office, when President Ruto was alerted to the fact that our resources are being misused at KEMSA, he did not hesitate. And again, I've seen for the first time that at the end of the public service, Mr. Koskei, in fact, has been meeting with the relevant officers at the national government, and he's been reading the Riot Act almost on a daily basis. And Ruto himself said that when it comes to corruption, leave that to me, I'm going to take personal responsibility. So at the end of every financial year, then we'll be looking at the president and saying, you promised Kenyans you're going to take personal responsibility. If there's a coin which is going to be lost under your watch, then we'll ask the president.
Okay. I think that's, I just wanted to say that we should all agree where the buck stops. When you say that citizens do not understand the finance bill, the document itself, and in fact members of parliament largely did not understand what it is, where does the buck stop? I mean, you can say that everybody should go and read in their rooms and all that. It is the responsibility of those introducing amendments to ensure that they have done enough seminars, symposiums, so that they sensitize their members what the document talks about. And when you talk about public participation, it's not the duty of Mama Mboga to run to the government printers, take the document and read. It is the responsibility of the government and the National Assembly as well to ensure that this document is largely available, number one, and then they have trainers who go to the people and tell them, listen, the president means well, the government policy is this and this. So that, by the way, there are so many people you can convert to your side instead of linking people to social media and throwing them all over and saying, you really don't read, you don't like to read. This is not the issue. The issue is important policy of government should be explained to the masses in a language they understand. No need to be technical, so that they all know, okay. So that even the government can know that, they have actually 2 million people who are not for this document. But to make it look technical and highly elitist is actually to miss the number of supporters that you would have gotten. So in my view, and that's why I'm saying the debate cannot be quality-based if you did not take this document in proper stages. Like Dismus has said, I agree entirely that a lot of comments are based on hearsay, what they see on Twitter and whatever, but it is the duty of the government. The buck stops with the president and parliament to ensure that the document is properly understood.
If I may weigh in, I think there was also a concerted effort on the part of the opposition to derail the debate on the finance bill. A lot of it, take for instance the tax, the 3% housing levy. That is one, and the turnover tax. That is another. So the opposition wants Mama Mboga and others who want to be brought into the tax bracket to believe that the government is out to punish them. Yet, as Nyaribo has rightly pointed out, taxation is the principle of every Kenyan. Every Kenyan ought to pay taxes, all and sundry, without exception. As long as you have an income, it is incumbent upon you to pay tax. So this turnover tax intends to bring in a lot more people into the tax bracket, because face it, we have about 70% or 70 to 80% thereabout of Kenyans who don't pay taxes at all. They're in the informal economy. They don't pay direct taxes. Then we have about 20% of Kenyans who have payslip and who are then burdened with carrying the tax that the rest of us ought to carry. So when we attempt to bring Mama Mboga, as Dismus always says, Mora and all these other people into the tax bracket, the opposition goes on a tangent and says, we are oppressing Mama Mboga. How do they expect the country to develop if it can't get revenues from the people, if it can't expand the tax bracket? This other one of the housing levy, We know that as a country we are doing badly. About 60 to 65% of our income now goes towards debt service, crowding out recurrent expenditure, crowding out money for development. This housing development levy, the fund as it was proposed, is a very innovative way of the government addressing the development issue that is not being funded because we are heavily in debt. Then when the opposition comes and criticizes and does not give an alternative, what do they expect? They are derailing, and they're derailing with the wrong message. Yeah, so
alternatives should be handed over by the
alternatives
opposition.
should be handed over by the opposition,
okay.
correct.
And Nyaribo, kindly clarify for us, because we expect the courts to be a little bit busy in this coming weeks. What exactly can be contested about the Finance Bill 2023, even as we await for President William Ruto to assent it into law? What exactly about the contentious clauses can we find heading towards the court for more clarification or other guidance here?
Yeah, and I think these matters are still before the court. Not sure if they have been decided. I think Omtata and several other people have filed applications and petitions. The main issue here was public participation implemented? Was it fully done? That's one. Two, these taxes you are levying on people, I mean, were people involved? Or you're simply, loading it over the people without their consultation? Because you don't have an absolute right in saying, I want 5% or 3%. Were the people involved? Such kind of things will actually be brought in the courts and several other issues. I just want to mention, before I leave that point, that the opposition is not very kind to Kenya Kwanza and government as a whole. That is the way it is. There is no other way in developed democracies that, and I'm sorry to say this, but you'll be told by priests and the pastors that there's always God and there's the devil. You will never ask the devil to do the thing that would actually make you go to heaven. And I'm sure it's an extreme kind of illustration. But I'm telling you, Khafafa, there is no way the opposition should see anything right about the government. Intellectually and for national unity and all that, once in a while the opposition can say, yeah, I think we like that policy, we may associate with it. But it is the duty of the opposition to actually keep the government all the time on check. Even where you have done right, they should, for the sake of it, just come up and say, no, you should not have done it like this, you should have done it like this. So that the government does not sleep, number one. So that government executives, technocrats do not steal. So that members of parliament associated with the State House are a little bit scared or fearful of simply going and wasting public resources. That's really the role of the opposition. So to expect that the opposition will come up and say, we like what the government is doing. I am sure, I'm aware, that the opposition is very weakened now. A lot of members of parliament were already bought over to the other side. But even those remaining, you mentioned Karua, Kalonzo, Sifuna, all the ilk of all those who are now at least trying to speak against the government, they are not necessarily wrong, but they are supposed to check. And the president himself made it very clear. I will not work with you through handshake. You play your role as a robust opposition. So, and even if that is not really achieved or achievable out of the way they have been swept over to the other side, it is the duty of the opposition to at least, I know Dismus is itching.
Yes, I actually am.
And so am I.
They should be objective in their opposing government policies, but it is really their role. And in developed democracies, that is really honestly how the government can work better.
Interesting. So as Dismus, you come in, and let's evaluate what the opposition is doing about it. Because others might argue that the planned Kamkunji meeting is perhaps a little bit too late, that we should have seen a robust opposition on the floor of the House defending Kenyans against what they term as punitive taxation. So what do you make of the political move that is coming this Tuesday, especially by the Azimio coalition?
Before I discuss the Kamkunji, Ishmael has assaulted two important points. The first one, that there was no public participation in the budget preparation process. It takes 1 full year the National Treasury, and all the state departments to prepare the budget. The tail end is when members of the public are invited to go before the Finance Committee and present their proposals. And I think for this budget session, the members were given about 2 weeks. I saw people going there with truckloads of information and presenting their position. Maybe the question we should be asking is that the information presented to that committee, was it quality or it was just quantity? That Mokua was given the opportunity, she was given the opportunity to present. Everybody, all and sundry were invited. Number two, the purpose of an election is for a political party that wins, they present a manifesto, and the moment they win, then the citizens have given them powers to implement their manifesto. So the guiding principle here is the manifesto. And if you've got the numbers like Kenya Kwanza does, you implement your manifesto, you translate it into the budget. And I'd like to take a departure from what I said, that when you're in the minority or opposition, that the only thing you're supposed to do is to oppose. You even oppose a good idea by driving a lot of propaganda. Like, for instance, when you talk about housing, Kenya suffers from housing insecurity. And one of the principles in housing insecurity is housing instability. At the end of every month, people who live in the urban areas, they'll be scratching their heads on how they're going to pay their rents or their mortgages. That is housing instability. Then you can look at the quality of houses. If you go to some parts in Kenya, those houses, you have to turn on the lights, whether it's day or night. Because of the quality of the houses, there is no window, there is no ventilation, and people get diseases. And there is evidence to confirm that in majority of the urban areas, those houses, where there is no natural light, people get a lot of conditions. So there's evidence to that. But now there was propaganda that housing in Kenya is not a priority. Never mind that about 2 years ago, Mr. Raila Odinga said that this housing levy is a very good thing which must be implemented. Now let's go to Kamkunji. If really Azimio was very keen to have an impact on the budget making process, then they would have applied pressure before tomorrow, because I suspect the president will sign it into law tomorrow. So they would have applied pressure maybe 3 weeks back. But now what have they done? The train has left the station, the horse has bolted, is when they're coming back to say that we want to apply pressure on the government. After the fact, I know they've got the Latin language, but you know now they're coming after the fact, the train has left the station. Now that is still part of propaganda, misleading Kenyans into believing that if you go to the streets, you can actually reverse the finance bill. One would have expected for them to come up with concrete proposals. When you're talking about addressing housing insecurity in Kenya, they say Kenya Kwanza wants to introduce a housing levy or housing fund at maybe 3% or 1.5%. This one doesn't make sense. Look at our proposal. I suspect, in as much as Azimio doesn't have sufficient numbers, but they have got the intellectual capacity, intellectual infrastructure to present ideas. And as Omolo Kijana once said, that if you present a good idea, then people will accept, people will buy. Because in any event, Kenya belongs to everybody. Kenya is not limited to Kenya Kwanza or Azimio. So if anybody thinks that the proposals are set forward by Kenya Kwanza are not solid, then you must present another set of ideas. You don't just go to the top of Mount Kenya or Kilimanjaro and then you start saying, Kwamba, that one doesn't work. No. You have to give us, you are not elected by Mokua just to criticize. You are not elected by Mokua to describe the problem. Mokua gave you powers to describe the problem and offer a solution. If you don't have a solution, then there's no need for you even to be in the National Assembly.
May I just add that this stringent opposition to the finance bill is just centered on two issues. And yet there are lots of other clauses in the finance bill that are good. So why should it be strenuously opposed on account of the housing levy or on account of the turnover tax only? Yet there are lots of other things in that finance bill.
Well, they opposed VAT on fuel, at least they tried to.
Yes. Yeah. I've had one. Can you actually count 10 things that they've opposed and have said that they should be thrown out of the window and they've given counter proposals? You cannot. On the strength of 2, 3, 4, maximum 5 things, do we throw out a bill that has almost 30, 40, 50 clauses?
Yep. It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
But then we can remove the bad issues and retain the good elements. Now, you didn't ask me about the housing levy.
Yeah.
And I just wanted, because really, you know,
the levy or tax?
Let me tell you, let me say this, it's my opinion. I mean, it's going to be the law. So really, this is just an opinion to enlighten Kenyans and just make comments about this. Let me ask you, how much money are the banks charging for a mortgage? Have we as a country looked at mortgage rules, mortgage policies? I remember Don the rules back in the 90s, when he came up and says, look, what are you doing to Kenyans? You are charging them over 100% of the money they borrowed. And you see the banks try to twist the rules at least to accommodate. And then this thing went to Parliament and it was heavily discussed. You're saying we need to do housing levy or housing tax, whatever you call it, and then have houses for the poor. You are leaving out a very important component of housing. Because even these houses that we are building, the banks are involved in either giving the money to the contracted party to build the houses, and of course the contracted party will get his money back from the bank. So you must address the core issue about housing in this country. I mean, I don't want the government to build for me the house, and I want to build it myself, but I want to get financing. How much is the bank going to charge me? It's 18%, 20% in some cases, and 30% if you went to some financial institutions. And we are quiet about this. This is actually ripping Kenyans. So if you say that Kenya Kwanza should actually give us all houses, you are not actually really trying to treat the problem. The problem is that mortgage in the country is very expensive. And if members of parliament can be honest, they will not just discuss housing without mentioning mortgages. But you see already banks have cushioned themselves. I mean, I'm sure they are mad by such revelations. If tax experts can come here and financial, finance guys come here and analyze exactly how much the banks are taking in penalties and interests in a span of 10 years, 15 years, we would all be so paid to learn this fact. So mortgage is an issue to me.
I think allow me to buttress that point quickly, Leonard. Yeah. It's a national tragedy that 60 years after independence, we don't have more than 30,000 mortgages in Kenya. Yeah. Because the banks do not have a standalone mortgage as a product. It's a sweetener for any other services. But again, a key aspect of that housing, the housing project, or the levy or the fund, it's also some sort of a special purpose vehicle. Because it's not about housing. It's about the employment opportunities to be created by engaging in massive housing construction, supporting the local industry. And that's where majority of the Azimio MPs got it wrong and started doing propaganda. Because it's not just about building, say, 10,000 houses. It's that if you're going to put up 10,000 houses, how many architects do you need? How many engineers? How many plumbers? The mamambogas who will be selling githeri and avocado, the people will be making wood and everything. Okay. So the multiply effect is overwhelming. So if you just look at the budget and then you look at housing in isolation, probability of getting it wrong is extremely high. And
we definitely had the deputy president speak to that. I think it was JICO at graduation. We don't have jobs. Jobs will be made by, such projects like the housing project and whatnot. But
because majority of the graduates from JICO are engineers, architects. Yeah. So these are the people who are actually going to drive this agenda.
Okay. I just wanted to say that bringing in the banks is a bit of a complex conversation, because when you talk of adjusting the interest rates that banks ought to charge, you're talking of monetary policy. Monetary policy is determined by the central bank. And I can tell you for free that interest rates are not going to come down on account of where we are as a country. Interest rates will go up because of domestic borrowing. And the domestic borrowing so far has not been as robust as it should be. And there has been pressure to adjust to make it sweeter, to make it attractive to domestic borrowers, domestic lenders. So, and the only way to make it attractive is to raise the interest rate. So interest rates are going to go up. That's monetary policy. But this other way of building houses through the housing levy, that speaks to, that's an innovative way of looking at it, and it speaks to fiscal policy. It's the government's way of raising money through taxation revenues and then using that money now to drive, as Dismus is putting it, drive the economy through building. You know, you build, then you employ lots of other people, and you offer much cheaper houses. And the government has given its incentives. It's going to provide the land, and it's going to put a ceiling. It's going to put a cap in terms of what houses ought to cost. Yeah, so that's a totally different conversation. It's a bit complex, and the government has become innovative in looking at this, in addressing this housing problem through fiscal policy instead of the monetary policy.
Okay. And also the housing will be in two levels. There will be the social housing and affordable housing.
Jesse, I'm not expert at all in matters finance and monetary policies and fiscal policies and whatever. But let this be very clear that complex conversation should be tackled completely, and these issues of housing must be properly disintegrated to the citizen and common man to understand in order to embrace and accept it. That is the main issue. And, you know, if you charge me 18%, like I told you in Donde's days, banks were charging up to 100%. It was discussed in Parliament, and at least a way was found, which meant that you cannot really, as a bank, charge more than 100% of the loan taken and continue charging. Okay, yeah. So that complex discussion should really be made, and the mortgage, you know, facility be capped at some interest. Of course, you speak of central bank. I cannot go there. I don't even know what they do. You say you say you have to. You say you cannot touch that area. Let me tell you, that is a conversation needed by citizens and by the National Assembly, so that we have reasonable mortgage rates. I mean, I am sure it also happens in all countries. In the US, you hear that they are actually closing down every other house bought during shortly after the Corona crisis. I mean, houses were sold. I agree. But there are several Kenyans today who are earning over 60, 70 or 100,000 who can actually buy a house for themselves in appropriate area, which they choose, if the mortgage and interest rates are manageable and reasonable in the country. Somebody's charging you 30% as interest rates, and he expects you to pay, and the economy is all bad. So that simply means we want to take your money and we want to sell your house. That's how I look at it.
It's definitely a conversation that will continue even as that housing project is implemented by the Kenya Kwanza government. I'd like us to shift focus, though we didn't talk about the implications, at least from the both of you gentlemen, the implications of the Tuesday meeting from a political lens. What exactly will be forthcoming?
For me, Jesse, for me, I know my brother will be castigating it and all that. For me, I mean, the Bible says never tire from doing good. I mean, whether it comes Tuesday, whether it comes Thursday or Friday, if it means that they want to sensitize Kenyans, and I'm not talking about Azimio per se. I believe my mother and my, aunties and all people in the village need to understand, what is this bill about? Why has it been passed? So if Kenya Azimio decides, okay, it is Tuesday, apart from the fact that it would really interfere with my schedule, getting my clientele to meetings and so that we talk and try and generate some income. Apart from that, whatever they want to do in Kamukunji to sensitize people, I think it's, and I think it has been said by the president himself. Yeah. If these guys were doing a peaceful meeting where nobody is being beaten, even after the meeting, no harassment, no looting, nobody would bother them. So I believe they have every constitutional right to gather and come to an assembly and say, this is what we think. That is their right. Okay. But whether it is impactful, of course, yes, it will be impactful, because every Kenyan will still continue to appreciate this. And this must do not limit this tax talk or housing levy talk to Azimio. I'm telling you, we are all walking in the streets, and we know that Kenyans really want to understand what is this all about. So if Azimio wants to do it on Tuesday or Thursday, Wednesday, that is their problem, but I think they are entitled.
From a political lens, your take, because we're having this conversation at a time where, Kenya Kwanza has amassed huge numbers in the August House, neutering any resistance. So ideally, any opposition on the floor of the House will be, the numbers will have their way and their say at the end of the day. How exactly should they manage in this political time we find ourselves in?
That is talking of Azimio. Azimio need to, I think Azimio's ideas are now archaic. They have some of these ideas like straight demos have outlived their usefulness. As Mokua has rightly pointed out, the horse has already bolted. There's no going back to the finance bill. It has been passed. There's absolutely no, it makes absolutely no sense to kid Kenyans that you can go to the streets, dance around with sufriyas on the head and effect a reversal of policy. That's kidding. I would support what our friend Nyaribo has said, a position where Kamkunjis are held to sensitize people about what the finance bill really is, it's what it portends going forward, and perhaps even to offer credible alternatives that can be perhaps exercised in 2027, not now. The horse has already bolted. My only concern is that given the history of Azimio and violent protestations, whatever they decide to do on Tuesday will not end well. That is my only fear.
So we definitely have concerns around that.
Yes.
Let's shift focus to yet another issue that played out evidently in the week, and it's the media onslaught. And we had from various leaders that, the media hasn't seen anything yet.
You ain't seen that yet.
Exactly. So we found ourselves as target of lectures here and instructions on perhaps how to best carry out our mandate. Dismus, let's start with this. Talk to us about that never-ending push and pull between, people in leadership positions and oversight institutions, including the media, and your observations around how exactly government should react to criticism that has been, centered around their day-to-day activities. And at the end of the day, we well know of the principle of separation of powers and the role of oversight institutions. How should we play about
it? In my view, what the media needs to do is to come up with a matrix and identify who are the stakeholders and what are their expectations. You manage the expectation. Then the national government also needs to establish who are the stakeholders and you manage expectations. So for me, I think it's in order for politicians, cabinet secretaries to criticize the media, and it's in order for the media to criticize government and shine light on every single policy decision, so that every single Kenyan has got an opportunity to speak on any issue, whether you are a cabinet secretary, whether you are an editor. The only thing that must be taken into good account, and Musalia Mudavadi pointed this out, is the language used. That when you are criticizing, you must use a diplomatic language. That when you are offering your criticism, you must not make any other party nervous, so that you do the criticism in like in this round table conversation. Because I know Ishmael has got very specific policies, but because he is well cultured, he's civilized, when he speaks, I cannot run away. I know he's not going to punch me. And that is what's supposed to happen with the media. The media must welcome criticism, and also the national government must welcome criticism, but the people who are offering this criticism must do it in a very diplomatic language, not to make anybody nervous. So that if you're watching the news at 9 o'clock and you know that a particular politician is about to criticize the media, then you don't tell anybody who is under the age of 18 to take a walk. That it's and I see it happening all over. It happens in the US, it happens in the UK, Ghana, Nigeria. So in my view, the only thing which needs to be, people need to pay attention to is the language. And a few days ago, Barack Obama was addressing people somewhere in the Middle East, and he said, there's no way a democracy will grow if you don't have a vibrant media that can call a spade, and there is no way a state will grow if it doesn't respect the media. So everybody should respect everybody's position, but just be careful on the language so that you don't make anybody nervous.
Okay, so as you come in, Leonard, are our institutions, especially these oversight institutions and bodies, including the opposition, you know, civil society, strong enough to survive an onslaught from the executive?
I think they are. They are. I mean, we've been through imperial presidencies, and the media survived. Yes, there were casualties then, but the media survived. And the media held the government to account then. Now we have a fairly democratic presidency. The president's powers are fettered. There's only so much that he can do. He cannot detain without a trial. He cannot enforce disappearances. There's only so much that he can do. I think we are in a dispensation where we are freest. We are freer than we have ever been from the independence, since independence. We can call the president names and get away with it, and the deputy and that sort of thing. So that fear should not arise. Yeah, I don't think the state is going to muzzle, the executive is going to muzzle the media or other institutions in any way. People are free to speak, to criticize. And it happened. Even in the last dispensation, in the Kenyatta administration. Yeah, President Kenyatta was criticized. He was called names at some point, and there was hardly anything he could do. People exercised their democratic right, and it happened. But just to add on what Dismus has said, I think even when we oppose or when we speak out freely, when we criticize, it must be in a language that is decorous, you know. What we have seen from some cabinet secretaries, the language used has been regrettable, reprehensible. But we need to ask ourselves, why has it come to that? Why do we have a CS getting so frustrated that he has to resort to language that cannot be repeated on national television? My view is that a lot of the time media does not accord government functionaries either the right of reply, or they do not give them time to make statements. In this matter that we are discussing, investigative work was done. Probably took about 2 or 3 months to gather that kind of report. It would have been fair to reach out to the CS involved and to give him enough time, maybe a week or perhaps 2 weeks, to come up with a rejoinder, to come up with a response on the findings, then have everything now put out there in the newspapers. But typically, the CS or any government functionary will be reached and given a couple of hours to come up with a response. And in a couple of hours, you can't respond to something that has been worked on for 3 months. So it becomes unfair, it becomes frustrating. So, and it then paints the government functionary in bad light. So that is the frustration that we are talking about and that we should address. Then again, media has responsibility. I know media is not called the fourth estate for nothing. It has power. Now to answer your question about whether it can be muzzled, after the executive, after the judiciary, after parliament, is the media, which sits as the fourth estate that offers oversight, in fact, over the other 3 arms of government. That oversight should be exercised responsibly as well.
Let me just buttress his point quickly. You recall at some stage that a cabinet minister actually invaded this media house in the middle of the morning. The media in Kenya survived. President Kenyatta said that newspapers are for wrapping meat. The media survived. Then a first lady invaded another media house, and the media was survived. In my view, the only thing that the media in Kenya needs to do is to be objective and be guided by national and public interests. Once you are guided by national and public interests, you will survive any storm.
As you come in, Ishmael, and kindly give us your perspective, because in progressed democracies, and we've seen it outrightly, perhaps in the US election, certain media houses, push their support, and it's no secret, behind a certain candidate. Now, at the end of the day, right now, we're in a situation where the government is calling out media houses as being a branch of the opposition. Perhaps this is due to their affiliations in the 2022 general election. How do we move on from that point, that we do not see perhaps media or government as the enemy, but we're trying to better this thing called democracy, where we call out a spade, you know?
Yeah. I think, Jesse, the media must stick to the institutional framework within which it operates. There is the Media Act. There is the constitutional provision for freedom of the press. There is the having said Media Act, there is a whole ministry in charge of what the media should do. I mean, Ministry of Information. So the liberty that the media has must operate within the democratic institution and the Constitution of Kenya. That's really where you should be worried, whether the media is working outside the Constitution or it is working outside the democratic values and principles espoused in our Constitution, espoused in the UN Convention documents, and what is reasonable to do in a democratic society. So that's where your worry should be. Your worry should not be, if I say this, Ishmael will be mad or might start to insult us. That should not be a worry. Because also, you must accept that media trade comes with not only responsibilities, but with some damages as well. I mean, there will be people who will not be happy with you. You've seen this in the United States also. I mean, where Trump, I remember, was always castigating this or that media. I think Fox News.
Apart from Fox. He beat everybody.
Fox was only his, and CBS, and he was. So it is not new for media to be lashed at and to be called names. What is very interesting is, and for this, I doubt any parents in the country can forgive Moses Kuria, that, we go to nursery school, pre-unit nursery school, primary, class 8, secondary. If you're in the other program, you do, O-level, and you go to A-level, and you read all these things. You read biology, you read chemistry, you need human physiology, the body is, anatomy, if you wish. And I mean, and this is a Bachelor of Commerce guy and highly learned. By the way, we know what is terminology, what is language, which words used in which occasion. And you are on a national television, not once. In the first time, you are using a certain word, an F word, and you think you look cool when you say such words. And then again, now you come back and you call a media. Did you learn all the words that you needed to learn by Form 4? Yes. Did you learn all the words you need to read to learn by the time you are a graduate? Yes. Then you just don't apply them. And on this one, I don't think we should shy away. I think the president should come out clearly and tell his ministers and tell them, by the way, there is something called corporate governance, and this is a major topic that has been introduced since 2014, 2015, where we have, for example, for corporates, a whole Mongozo document that you must follow as a corporate. So the ministers have their rules. The State House has given rules that the ethical, conduct by ministers. How can you? I mean, I'm seated with my daughter, my son, and we're all watching television, and a whole grown-up man is using certain words that we all learned. I mean, we were in primary. We know what is this word, what is that word. Right, yeah. So this is how children fail to respect us. Because they start to imagine, they look at you, why are you so silly sitting with me here? Look at how people should talk. And that's a national television. So I think the president must come out clearly and confirm to Kenyans whether Moses Kuria is actually following the ethical standards set by the cabinet, sorry. If he does not come out and he lets these things slide away, it means you are teaching children in homes to use certain words because it's quite cool. So if you say, my brother Khafafa says that probably media does not give government enough airtime. Honestly, Jesse, you call me for a whole hour. Me, I am a citizen. I mean, you could easily decide this, I'm not giving Nyaribo this airtime. I want to give Minister so and so. If any minister, I am sure, calls for a press conference, even Moses Kuria, if he calls for a press conference tomorrow, everybody will give him the mic. Now, if he's going to use those words, and he has called a press conference, honestly. So let us call a spade a spade. The president must not fail us in terms of whipping his, cabinet ministers and other leaders and telling them the language you use in public must meet the Kenyan values. You saw what his mother, the mother of the president, did to a journalist somewhere. I mean, sometimes you are actually last for right reasons. Okay. I mean, we have to accept that mother to the president actually, did something. And I don't want to go to that direction for now. But what I'm saying is, you can be corrected in a very decent manner. All right. What do you think if the president's mother, at her caliber, what do you think if she used that occasion to use certain language to that journalist? She had every right to say, but she instead went down and said, look, my daughter, don't be offended. I really look at some Kenyans, really. If we had Kenyans like this, not Kenyans like those who come with a foul mouth and try to make us feel like we don't know what we are doing. Honestly, that the president must save us.
Should there be a consequence for such, especially for a person in high position? Because the bare minimum would be apologize and withdraw those comments. But we had from the cabinet secretary during his appearance in the Senate that apology is not forthcoming. So Dismus, final comments as we finalize. What should be the bare minimum? Withdraw those comments or at least exit office if worse comes to worse? What do you make of it?
For me, I think there would be two options. For him to actually explain to Kenyans the reason as to why he used those comments. Okay. Or apologize. Okay. But he indicated in black and white that he is not going to offer an apology. So maybe what he needs to do is actually for us to understand the motivation and establish where there was miscommunication between him and journalists. But because these are the final comments, there's something that we really need to commend the administration. And President Ruto has been proactive in regional peace and security initiatives, which again is giving Kenya a lot of credibility. So for me, as somebody who is very keen in international business, it's very exciting that President Ruto has gone to the global stage and is raising Kenya's profile to the extent that is now creating strategic partnerships, especially with countries that have got a lot of experience. And I know Nyaribo, this is his space, so he knows, for instance, the Angola situation, because Angola went through turbulence for a long time, but now Kenya has created a very good relationship with Angola, and using Angola, all other African countries are benefiting from their experiences. Because you can't have a situation like what is happening in Sudan or South Sudan or DRC, and then you keep quiet and say that because you are in Kenya, an island of peace, you can afford to just have your coffee and tea and pepper steak and assume everything else is fine. So I think at this stage we need to commend President Ruto and also the regional presidents like President Lorenzo from Angola, because all of them now are trying to make sure that Africa is peaceful. And
she's a Kedi also.
Yeah. Now Nyaribo and Kodolea much, and so how does that affect Kenya? But we are going to get a bigger market. Okay. When you have peace in DRC, and we have Kenyan institutions that are doing business in DRC. Yeah. So it actually benefits Mama Mboga. Right. When you have peace in Sudan, your parents sell a lot of coffee in Sudan. So when there's a crisis, those people don't consume as much tea. So I think these are some of the regional initiatives that we need to look at.
Okay, Khafafa, final comments.
Final comments. Yeah. I think the Chief Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, has clarified that Moses Kuria's comments were in no way reflective of the position of the government. They were personal comments. They were his, and whatever happens, whichever way it comes, he will carry his own cross. To add to what Dismus has said, the press now needs to begin to highlight what the government is doing. We've dwelt too much on the negatives, but there are positives that this government has achieved in the short time that it has been in power. For example, we should start talking about the hiring of 30,000 plus teachers in schools. That's a big thing. It's never been done before, at least not to that scale. And not in that time frame. We should start talking about the Hustler Fund. My friend Nyaribo said that I think he mentioned that the hustlers were not being taken care of, but there's the hustler fund. Obviously, you can't take a hustler and elevate him to the position of CS because he does not have the qualifications or he has not applied for the job. Did he apply for the job and he was denied? To date, I've not had a single hustler saying, I applied, I met the qualifications, and I was not invited for interview, or I'll stand down. There's a very crucial point, a last crucial point. No one is talking about the guns in the killing fields of the North Rift that have been silenced. Yeah, when Professor Kindiki was given the internal security docket, people mocked him and they mocked his voice. And I kept saying, it's not his voice that steals the guns. It's the authority that he wields, his ability to exercise that authority. So the guns are silent. The government has achieved what it set out to do, and it gives us hope that there's a lot more that they're going to do in the next 5 years.
Finally, I
think that the president is doing quite very well to represent Kenya, and he's taken up that global image that I think we're very happy about. Becomes very difficult actually now to try to demean the president on ground of the local problems that we have, because he's done very well. The other time in South Africa, now in France, and in all the trips he's making, there is no doubt about that. I urge all the ministers, especially the cabinet ministers, to support the president. That's why they were actually appointed by the president. And then not use foul language, because if your father is working in the fields to bring food home, you've got to support him, not to try to make him naked and make him look bad and make him, use all this foul language. So I think that there are no campaigns anytime soon. Whether the opposition is not supporting the government, that's not the issue. The cabinet secretaries appointed by the president of this republic must support him. And I would expect that they use the president's language. If not, they should ship out. There is no issue of going around such a bad language, actually. Moses Kuria should resign, and if he doesn't, the president should convene a cabinet meeting and ensure that, we want to see what he will tell him. This soft language of saying that was his personal whatnot, no. In proper corporate governance, Moses Kuria should own up, and probably, if he doesn't step aside by himself, he should be asked to resign by the president.
Well, as we finalize, the president raised something interesting, and Liuliza, who will defend him, in such cases where the media is bashing, interesting. I think we should end it at that particular point. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you for your time. Ishmael Nyaribo, advocate, Dismus Mokua, political risk analyst, and Leonard Khafafa, who is a public policy analyst. We definitely appreciate your input as we were taking a look at some of the issues that arose in the past week. Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's edition of Checkpoint. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you're adequately informed. Have yourself a fantastic start to the week. My name is Jesse Rogers. Good evening.